Good evening and welcome back to the Clergy Cafe. I suppose I should say now, Happy Easter. We're through Lent, we're through the tunnel, and we are back with another episode of our Clergy Cafe religious special. It's great to have you with us tonight. Whoops, pressed the wrong button there yet again. That's a good start. But anyway, we are go now. I thought a video would have appeared behind that screen, but it didn't. It's great to be back with you tonight in the Clergy Cafe. It feels like it's been a while, but it's good to finally be back. And we are going to continue with our religious life specials. We've had some incredible stories over the last few weeks, and I know again tonight we're going to hear yet again another incredible story. But just before we start, I'm going to bring in Father Chris and say hi to him. I didn't warn him we were going to do this beforehand, but I'm sure he'll cope fine with this. So good evening, Father Chris. It's great to have you back with us. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Andy. Yourself?
Very well, thank you. Last time you missed us, as we had the Sisters of Nazareth, you were obviously in the cathedral doing the Chrism Mass. Hard to believe we're finally through Easter and we're now into Easter tide, aren't we?
Oh, it's incredible, really. But equally, it also feels a long time ago since we had the celebration of Easter Sunday. But we've got these 50 days of Eastertide to celebrate that great event.
And Holy Week was an incredible experience for us all, I think, and especially with people being back in churches now. How was it from the parish? And obviously we joined you for your Monday, Thursday service live on YouTube as well. But how was that experience of being in the parish with congregations back again?
Oh, it was fantastic, Sandy. I mean, as you say, last year it was just me and a camera for the Triduum. This year, all the Triduum celebrations in our parish were full. Unfortunately, we had to turn a few people away each evening, but it was a really good celebration to have people gathered together again. It was fab.
As hard as it sounds, it must have been quite nice to have full churches and to have to send people away.
It was. It just shows that people are now getting that confidence to come back and to celebrate their faith in person as well as online.
Well, it's great once again to have you back with us, and we look forward to you sharing some of your wisdom with us at the end.
Thanks, Andy.
Just if you want to subscribe, feel free to subscribe. That was the wrong screen as well. Never mind, we're doing well now. So we'll just crack on. Tonight we are joined by Brother James Hayes. Brother James was born in Southampton in 1968 and is the youngest of 5 children. Both parents were originally born in Ireland. A former pupil of St Mary's College in Southampton, run by the Delaminays brothers. Brother Jim joined the Order of Brothers in 1990 after completing his music degree at Liverpool University. In August 1990, another brother drove Brother Jim to the novitiate in the south of France. It was set in the Pyrenees foothills. Since taking his vows, Brother Jim has taught music, RE, French and film studies, led a staff music and pupil music worship band, and conducted school orchestras. In more recent years, he's also worked in school chaplaincy. Brother Jim is a keen musician and can play the clarinet, piano, guitar, and also writes his own music. He loves to cycle and to walk. This summer, Brother Jim will be moving to France, where he will be joining one of the Order's older communities in Brittany. It's great to have Brother Jim with us tonight, and I will admit that I had to get a bit of practice before in saying the congregation's name, and I'm not sure I got it right either. I went a bit fast across it. But tonight, I'm delighted to welcome Brother Jim into the Clergy Cafe. Brother Jim, it's not always this chaotic, I promise you, and I promise from now on we'll get it right. But first of all, just for us again, just say your order's name for us so we get it right on the Clergy Cafe tonight.
Okay, we are the Delamine brothers.
I stuck an extra E in there, I think, as well. So, Brother Jim, it's great to have you with us, and we're looking forward to hearing some of your story and also some of the story of your congregation as well. But I think most people might not have heard of your congregation. So, can you tell us a little bit about your order?
Okay, well, we were founded in 1819 in Brittany, in Western France, in the aftermath of the French Revolution. And it was in a context where the Catholic Church had been persecuted within that revolution that went on. And a lot of priests, a lot of religious lost their lives through refusing to bow to restrictions that were being placed by the revolutionaries. One of the consequences is that church-based schools, parish-based schools, were basically shut down. So come the early 19th century, and our founder, who was a young diocesan priest, taking up mission in Saint-Brieuc in the northern coastal area of Brittany, he had a chance to look around not just Saint-Brieuc, but the surrounding villages and towns, and realized that young people were not being educated. And not just a question of faith instruction, but also obviously secular education. And he wanted to do something about it. Another priest in a different part of Brittany, further south, in a place called Auray, a certain Father Gabriel Deshay, and there's just a little quirky coincidence of fate that his name Deshay, pronounced literally in English Des Hayes, contains my surname Hayes. But he was a little bit older. He'd had more experience as a priest and had already been involved in trying to found and expand other religious orders in southern Brittany. So he heard about this young dynamic priest in northern Brittany, Father Jean-Marie de Lamennais, and said, look, why don't we get together and just kind of brainstorm what we feel needs to be done for our church in Brittany. And one of the main points was reopening the schools. So to cut a long story short, they gathered together young men and young women who were interested in becoming teachers, but also themselves were following religious instruction from the two priests, and expressed the desire to become religious, to become members of their own religious orders. So there was a female order, the Daughters of Providence, that was founded, and our order, the formal name of which is Brothers of Christian Instruction, although we popularly call ourselves the Delamine Brothers. And that foundation began in 1819. The reason why we took the name Delamine Brothers, so following Father Delamine as opposed to Father Deshay, was that Father Delamine became the first Superior General of our order.
Right.
Father Deshay had a lot of other projects on the go around Brittany. So he would stay in contact with Father Delamine. He'd come to the annual retreat for the brothers every year. They corresponded regularly, but he would be involved in his other projects while Father Delamine stayed as the shepherd of this fledgling congregation, if you like.
And so one of the things we've been discovering as we've gone through the Clergy Cafe, especially with the religious congregations, that every different order has a very different charism. How would you describe the Delamine charism?
Its initial inspiration was to work with and for young people, to educate them, but to hold the two elements of education, faith instruction and secular education, for want of a better word. Our founders, both of them, felt it very important to give young people from what was a very poor rural environment in Brittany, the chance of a better life by teaching them essential skills, by giving them a good education. And that went hand in hand with their faith instruction. And the faith element underpinned the secular side of their educational training, if you like. So to sum up, our founder, Jean-Marie de Lamennais, would say that our order was founded to educate the young and to make Jesus Christ better known and better loved.
And you mentioned your founder a couple of times. Just tell us a bit about your founder as well.
Okay, well, he was a very interesting character. He's the son of a wealthy merchant trader who lived in Saint-Malo. If anyone's ever been to Saint-Malo, it's an incredibly picturesque walled town that lives on this rock, basically just off the coast of northern Brittany. It's expanded onto the mainland since, but the original town is just this walled town, beautiful old stone walls. And it was a thriving port. Our founder's father was actually given a noble title by the French king prior to the revolution because of his willingness to help the poor during a time of famine in the late 18th century. And that was where the de Lamennais part of his name came from. He was originally Jean-Marie Robert. Robert was his surname. And he was given this title of noblesse, de Lamennais, as a recognition of basically giving free food to the poor at a time when they were in. Our founder, growing up in that environment in Saint-Malo, which was renowned not just for trading, but also pirates. Pirates and explorers. Pirates who would attack British trading ships. So the British didn't have a terribly good name in the town, shall we say. They were a Catholic family, devoutly Catholic. But come the French Revolution, being openly Catholic was very dangerous. But our founder, from about the age of 7 or 8, he developed an uncanny knack for being able to spot priests who were trying to pretend they weren't priests, in civilian dress, hanging around on the street corners, waiting for someone to come and get them to celebrate a secret mass in someone's house, etc., etc. And there's this one famous story one day where he came across this man who was looking very uncomfortable, and he didn't look comfortable in the dress that he was wearing. So our founder at the age of 8 or 9 walks up to him and says quietly, he says, "Are you a priest?" And the priest spontaneously feels he can trust the young boy. He says, "Yes, I am. I'm waiting for someone, but they've not turned up. Is there somewhere I can go?" And he said, "Don't worry, come with me. You can come back to our house." And that priest became a lifelong friend of the founder and was instrumental in him actually becoming a priest later on. But it was through his contact with these priests and the courage that they showed in an environment where practicing their faith, celebrating mass, could get them executed. Our founder decided, I want to be someone like that. I want to be a priest. I want to give my life to the church, no matter what the danger. So he did. He through the local bishop, was able to go to Paris, train in Paris, and come back and then serve his local community in Brittany.
It's quite incredible that foundation, that's where it started from, was in that sort of almost persecution, really, isn't it? However, I find it really interesting that you say how you could tell who the priest was in the street. I think that's still very true nowadays. You can always tell a priest when he's not in his collar for some reason. I don't know what it is. Now, obviously, the work that you do has changed over the years. And how would you say the work of your order has changed since the time of your founder?
I think probably the main way it's changed and evolved is into extracurricular activities. We still, if you look at our worldwide network, the school is still the focal point, but it's a focal point from which spring a lot of other activities. So if I take the example of our province, which is France and England, we've got a network of different youth movements, one of which literally translated is called Faith and Prayer. They run weekend retreats and recollections for young people around Brittany. We have a network of summer and winter camps called Estival, which is now predominantly run by a team of young adults who kind of grew up through the network and are now leaders themselves in that network. And one of my roles, even while I was based in England, was as their team chaplain, if you like. So the chaplain to this team of young adults who do incredible work, and it's all voluntary, giving up their school holidays because most of them are teachers, running camps, as I say, winter camps and summer camps. I think this coming summer, there will be something like 10 different camps being run during the French summer holidays. We still have a lot of brothers involved in them on a volunteer basis and on a kind of mentoring basis, but it's predominantly led and driven by, as I say, these young adults themselves. So that's become a major element of our work. And then in more recent years, it's taken on more of a social work aspect as well, a more deliberate social work aspect in terms of, as Pope Francis would say, trying to reach those young people on the peripheries and help them. In France, we've got 3 bases where we have, in large towns in Brittany, a unit where we have young adult volunteers who give a year or 2 years of their time working with individual pupils who, for whatever reason, are struggling in regular school. So they come to these units for a few days, a day, a week, a few weeks, and they get one-to-one assistance and tutoring. That's proved very successful, and we found that the local educational town bodies or county bodies are sending more and more of these youngsters to us and to other units like ours. That's only going to, I think, increase given what young people have been through during the pandemic. There's also another initiative which I've been very involved in helping to get going in Brittany, which is actually attached to a Canadian movement called Village des Sources, literally the village of the wellspring. And I think it's a fantastic project. And it basically a network of residential centres where whole school classes can come. So it's not volunteer groups. It's a school that will send a whole class at a time, and they'll come for a weekend generally. And it's a way of helping to boost young people's self-esteem, but also overcome issues of bullying, issues of bad social dynamics within that class, to bring them closer together. But also what the Canadian movement, which was founded over 20 years ago, has found, it's actually helped relationships with their teachers as well. Because they all, during these 2 days, learn to trust each other, and they speak openly to each other. And the teachers just can't praise these initiatives high enough. When they come back to school with their class the following week or whatever, it's a completely different environment. So I discovered this project when I went to Canada on another trip, a different trip, some years ago, about 10 years ago. And through contacts that myself and another layperson who came with me had with people in Canada, we got a group of them to visit Brittany. And through that visit, they were able to then train some volunteers from Brittany who went over to Canada, who then came back and helped found our first residential centre. We just this last summer opened a second one. We're hoping to open a third one now next summer, and that's something that I'll hopefully be able to get more involved in with me living permanently in France from this summer. One of the elements of these residential camps that really attracted me is that at the end of each weekend retreat, they ask the young people, they get them, like we all do, I guess, nowadays, to fill in an evaluation. And what they found was that the words of these young people were incredibly powerful and incredibly moving in terms of what they said about their own experience of that weekend. And over in Canada, in the early years of the movement, the founder had a very good friend who's a Catholic songwriter. And he said, look, I would love you to try and put some of these words to music. And so he did. So he asked the young people permission, and they said, yeah, fine. So he took their words and he turned them into songs. And what they did for the 5th anniversary of their movement is that they had a concert, a charity concert, and they sang the songs of the young people, the words of the young people. And what they had was that in between each song, the young people who'd written the texts would give a personal testimony. And with myself and with my musical background, I thought this was just such a fantastic initiative. And what it allowed the young people to do, in a sense, through telling their stories, it gave them a chance to minister to other young people, and hopefully communicate to young people who were struggling with whatever issues it might be, help them to realize that they're not alone. And so when the Canadians came over to Brittany in 2017, they actually came as a traveling musical group. So they actually put on 2 of these concerts in Brittany. And it was from French-speaking Canada, so it was all in French, which obviously helped. And I brought a group of young people from our school in Liverpool, and they joined in, and they all seem to get a great deal out of it. So yeah, it's a project that I've become quite passionate about, and yeah, I'm looking forward to getting more and more involved in that in Brittany.
And quite amazing to hear how your order has developed over the years and changed with the times, which I think is important for all religious congregations. However, you were taught yourself by the Delaminay brothers. Do you think back then, did you feel that spirit of the congregation sort of attracting you to become a brother?
To be perfectly honest, in terms of religious life, the first thing that really attracted me was monastic life, contemplative monastic communities. I really liked the brothers in our school. It wasn't that I didn't. And I mean, one brother in particular I found incredibly funny. We all did. He was a real comedian. I look back on him with great fondness, and I had the joy of actually being in community with him for a few years before he passed away. I mean, his RE lessons, I did general RE, I didn't take the A level. His RE lessons consisted of telling stories about the Second World War. He was in training as a brother in Jersey during the Second World War, and was captured by the Germans and sent to an internment camp in Austria, spent a year there, and was eventually told by someone that because he had Irish parents, he could claim Irish citizenship, and because Ireland was a neutral country, they'd had to let him go. Which is actually what happened. And so he was set free from this prisoner of war camp in the middle of Austria in the middle of the Second World War, given a few pounds in his pocket, and had to make his own way back across Europe.
Wow.
And just the anecdotes of hearing about his adventures was just incredible. And he'd act them out.
Right.
He'd play the various characters, and that would be our RE lesson. It was brilliant. It was great fun. They were my favourite RE lessons. And that actually taught me something really important in terms of education, is if you can make something personal as an educator, I think you've got much more chance of communicating and making a connection with the young people. If they can tell that you're just regurgitating something from a textbook or from a course that you've learnt, then okay, they might get a good grade, but you won't be communicating any enthusiasm or passion for the subject. And I mean, that's a word actually. I was thinking about what I might say this evening, and one of the key words that kept coming back was passion. I consider myself very lucky, and that's another thing that kept coming back, is how lucky I feel I am. I've got a lot of passions, whether it be music, whether it be cinema, whether it be sports, outdoor pursuits. And I think the one thing I had to work at as a teacher was a passion for my faith. But it did come, thank God. And I think over the years I became a more passionate RE teacher. It became something that I really did want to communicate. It became something more and more meaningful to me. But because of my musical background, I had the ability to hopefully communicate that through song and through music, through worship songs, and through school liturgies. But to come back to our brothers, it was when I was in sixth form. It was actually at the end of one of these RE lessons, the Second World War RE lessons, that I overheard a conversation between one of the lads in my class and the brother concerned about a diocesan youth conference that was taking place, well, actually starting that night. It was a Friday afternoon. And this lad saying he was now unable to go. He was going to be representing our sixth form. And I said, well, okay, I'm not doing anything this weekend. I'm willing to give it a shot. I'll tell you in a little bit maybe about how I got to the point where I actually said that, because there were some things that happened a little bit younger. But to answer this question about my brothers and monastic life, the conference itself had a keynote speaker from Downside Abbey, Benedictine Abbey in Somerset. And I got talking to him over the meal, I think on the first night. And by the end of that weekend, he'd invited me to come and visit his community. And that conference was, I think, at the October half term, the beginning of the October half term. I went and visited Downside the beginning of the Christmas holidays. I was in lower sixth at the time, and it just blew me away. I arrived about, it must have been about 5 o'clock. They were singing Vespers at the time in the Abbey Church, and I opened the door at the back of the church, and all I could see were the spotlights on the choir stalls in the sanctuary area. The church was pretty much in darkness apart from the odd flickering candle. And I just had this heavenly sound reverberating around the church, which was the monks singing monastic chant. And I was transported. It was, it blew me away. I think I burst into tears and just kind of sat down and let it wash over me for a few minutes. And so that I was there 5 days, I think. I came back from that thinking, wow, I would love to be in a community like that. I was very lucky that my music teacher was a devout Catholic, but also had an acute sensitivity to what I was going through, I think, in terms of this churning around of ideas about vocation. I'll just wind back a little bit, because I'll probably need to say how that started. It was when I was when I was in fourth year at school. Went to mass that particular Sunday with my mother, who was very devout. Not a pushy Catholic. She wasn't someone who, after a certain age, forced me or my siblings to go to mass, but she went, and I was someone who very much trusted her and valued her opinion on things. She was a very wise person. And so, you know, she said, would you like to come to mass, James? And I'd generally say, yeah, I'd go along with her. It would only be once a fortnight, because she was a geriatric nurse working nights in the hospital, and every other week we'd work weekends. So the weekends she wasn't working, we'd basically go to mass together. That weekend it was Vocation Sunday, and the priest addressed the young people in the church and said, okay, well, at least ask yourselves the question, is God calling you to a vocation in the church? And I kind of sat there and, is he? I've no idea. And a few moments afterwards, I kind of found myself surprised by my own answer, that I couldn't say no to the question. And that stayed with me. That question that the priest asked stayed with me, and I couldn't get it out of my head. Is God calling me to a vocation? And I wanted to get the answer. I wanted to find out, is he or isn't he? And it was actually my music teacher in school was the first person I spoke to, because I felt like I asked him. He was a a convert. He was actually brought up a Methodist, but he was someone who, I think, like I was alluding to earlier, in discovering Catholicism, it was something that he was passionate about. And although he wasn't an RE teacher, his faith, he was able to communicate it through his teaching of music, which was again a great lesson for me in later years. So I had this visit in Lower Sixth to Downside. I spoke to my teacher about it, and he said, "That's brilliant, but I also know of another community in southwest Wales that he'd gone to, Caldy Abbey on Caldy Island." And he said, "Well, why don't I arrange for you and a few other pupils to come with me for a weekend there?" So I said, "Yeah, sure, why not?" So there were four of us, three pupils and my teacher. We went, and if anyone knows Caldy, they'll know it's a very special place. For those of you who don't, it's about 20 minutes, half an hour's fishing boat journey away from the Welsh mainland, the port of Tenby. And it's just the most amazing little island. It's got sea cliffs and sea caves on one side. It's got a small wood on the other end. And perched there in the middle is this very Mediterranean-looking white stone with the red tiled roof building. And Cistercian monks, Downside is Benedictine. But I found the same kind of connection with the atmosphere there, the prayerful atmosphere. And my favorite time of the day there, although it is quite ironic because I'm not really a morning person per se, but to go to vigils, because where we stayed was in a guest house and you'd have to follow a path with torches. And it kind of, I always felt when we were doing this during that trip that we were like the famous five. It was kind of, we're on an adventure, we were out at night with our torches. And so we'd go up to the church, and it was just this magical experience of praying vigils with the monks. And so I came back from Caldy, that particular trip, thinking, okay, no, not Benedictine, Cistercian for me. And I went back there. That following summer, because I thought, okay, I need to go there on my own. I need to test this out. So I went for a week, and I followed my music teacher's advice. He said, when you're there, ask to live as much as possible the way the monks do. So volunteer to do some manual work with the monks. And so I did. They gave me some tasks to do, one of which, again, involved getting up early in the morning with another young guy who was there, a bit like me, who was kind of discerning his own vocation journey. And the two of us were asked to work in a field that overlooked the sea on the top of this cliff. And they planted some young trees, some saplings, and there are a load of, the grass had basically grown around these saplings, so we were asked to go around the field cutting the grass back. And basically, as we were doing it, the sun rose over the sea. And I'll just never forget it. It was just this heavenly vision, and and the two of us. There was one moment when the two of us stood there, and we just kind of spontaneously started saying the rosary together as the sun was rising over the sea, and I'll never forget it. It was just again a magical moment. So I came back from that, and I was full of it. I thought, oh gosh, I'd love to go and join a community like that. I'd be able to use what I discovered in me was a very powerful urge to study music at university. Maybe need to explain a little bit about that. Again, my music teacher in school is very much responsible for this. I'd always sung in primary school, sung in concerts and music festivals and whatever, but never took up an instrument. My brothers and sisters had when they were young, but it didn't last. They kind of did things for a few years. So my parents said to me, look, only, which was kind of wise words, I think, only do it if you're sure that it's going to be a worthwhile investment. And I wasn't sure. But by the time I got to third year, nowadays year 9 in secondary school, my music teacher said, look, James, you should really be playing an instrument. So I'd been offered a clarinet when I was in primary school, but wasn't really motivated enough to do anything with it. So I said, well, okay, I'll try the clarinet. So my mum and dad, God love them, they bought me a second-hand clarinet, and I just, as soon as I started making a sound with it, I was away. I did my grade 4 within 2 terms, grade 5 within a year. And it was the day I got the certificate for grade 5. I was sitting on my bed, and it was a distinction, but it wasn't, it was nowhere near full marks. I just knew. I mean, I can still hear myself saying the phrase to myself, one day I will have something that I will need to say to others that I will only be able to say through music. I have to study music. And that was before the thoughts of the vocation that really became clear in my mind. The first certainty that I had was that I had to study music. But that raised a quite interesting dilemma, because at that stage I didn't play piano. And I was already, how old was I? I was 15, just going on 16 at that time. And so I said to my music teacher, I said, look, I really feel as if I'm meant to study music at university. So he said, well, you're going to need to learn the piano. So he was a piano teacher. To cut a long story short, crash course in piano. By my upper 6th year, I was preparing for grade 8 clarinet and grade 8 piano in the same term, which was an absolute nightmare. And I was also teaching myself guitar. So I was doing A levels, but they were very much lower down on my list of priorities. But so I got my grade 8 clarinet, got a really good grade in that, distinction again. Piano, scraped through it by the skin of my teeth. But I got what I needed to be able to do music at university. So, but coming back to that summer at the end of the lower 6th, I came back from that trip to Caldy, and the more time elapsed after that trip, the more I became uncertain about whether or not I was being called to Caldy, if you like. I felt a desire to go there. That was absolutely certain. Part of me really wanted to join that community. But as I say, as the days moved on, I started to get a bit of clarity and think, well, this is coming from me. I don't think it's coming from God. Something else that had really helped me with that during the preceding months, but also after that summer, was time I used to go into the chapel in school during the day, and it was a way of just trying to reconnect with that atmosphere that I'd found in both monastic communities, the silence, the calm. It didn't have the music, but at least it gave me a chance to listen to my heart and listen to what God was saying to me. And a bit of that, I think, was going on that summer holiday as well, in me having the honesty to say to myself that I don't think it's actually God who's calling me to this. But then that left me with another question, another dilemma. Well, what is he calling me to? And by the end of that summer holidays, I got what I thought was an answer. I'll try and be as brief as possible, but I could go on for hours about that particular evening. There was a song by a band from Liverpool, a band called the Icicle Works, and a song called Hollow Horse, which had become a kind of personal anthem for me that year. And there were days when I'd listened to it 2 or 3 times because the words I just felt were so powerful. They spoke to me. I mean, the chorus, we'll be as we are when all the fools who doubt us fade away, fortune deep and wide, intimidated, restless in the wait. I was feeling restless. I wanted to go. I wanted to go off to this monastery. Couldn't wait. Be careful what you dream of. It may come up and surprise you. I can confess my life's a mess. I've come to idolize. I could tell you the whole song. Anyway, I was listening to this song, and I had a photo of our school pupils and staff on my bedroom wall. And when it got to the final chorus, we'll be as we are when all the fools who doubt us fade away, my eyes fell on the face of one of the brothers in the picture. And the nice little bit of circularity here is that it was the teacher who entertained us with this anecdotes from the Second World War, and whose conversation I overheard that led me to go on that visit to Downside. I saw my face superimposed onto his body in that photo. And I saw it as clear as I'm looking at your faces on this screen in front of me. And it terrified me. It absolutely terrified me. That was the moment I thought, okay, God is actually trying to say something to me here. My heart started racing, and I knew instinctively that this wasn't coming from me. And I suppose in hindsight, I can say that that single moment, I've never doubted since then that God was calling me to be a Delamene brother, because of how powerful that moment was. What I've doubted is whether or not I've been up to the challenge. It's whether or not I'm worthy of fulfilling that calling. That's where the doubts have come in, if you like. But no, that from that moment, and again, I consider myself incredibly lucky, because people can go through discernment journeys that seem never ending for years, and never get the same kind of clarity that I got in that instant. But I was very lucky. I did get that clarity.
And
and I immediately went next door to tell my mum, and she was very calm. She said, well, whatever you choose to do in life. Are you still there? I'm frozen at the moment. Can you hear me?
Yeah, no, we've still got you. Don't worry, you're still going. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. And she said, well, whatever you do in life, we'll still be here. We'll always be here for you. And that started to calm me down. But the clincher was that the phone rang. And it was one of the brothers from school, a different brother, but one who'd been my form teacher in fourth year, Brother John. And he was inviting me for a meal to the brothers' community. And we'd never had a phone call from the brothers before. And this was within 10 minutes of me having this experience listening to a song. And I after taking the call, I went back to my mum, and I think I just had a broad grin on my face. I just thought, this is just too much. I can't, what on earth is happening? And I told her, and we both started laughing. And she said, well, it must mean that this is what you're meant to do with your life, James. And I said, yeah, I think it is. It all happened very quickly after that, because that was summer lower sixth. Come September, I was filling in UCAS form, and I put Liverpool down as my first choice university, because that's the only other community that the brothers had in this country. They were in, at that stage, Southampton and Liverpool. And yes, the irony in hindsight has not been lost on me that it was a song by a Liverpool band that led me to go to Liverpool. And one of the lovely little touches, again, a little bit of circularity in this, is that in studying music at Liverpool University, I got the chance to meet the bass player of the Icicle Works. I didn't tell him about my vocational story. I probably should have. But I was able to quiz him on one or two nerdy facts about B-sides and whatever. And anyway, yeah, it was nice meeting him. But yeah, so that was the beginning then of my life with the brothers, was studying in Liverpool, living with them for 3 years. The first 2 years I was as a discerner, I suppose you would say. The final year I was officially a postulant. And it was after that the superior of the community, Brother Francis, who'd been the one who'd actually come and picked me up in Southampton and drove me to Liverpool 3 years earlier. He was the one who drove me down then to the south of France for me to begin my novitiate, which was an incredible year.
One of the things that keep coming up for us in the Clergy Cafe is that a lot of religious seem to sort of hesitate in telling family and parents particularly. But for you, that was quite a different experience, wasn't it?
It was, certainly with my mother. she was someone who, as I said, her wisdom and she was a great listener. She was someone who you felt you could always talk to, and you could tell her anything. So, I mean, again, that's, something that I've hopefully tried to learn from in my life, in particular as a school chaplain, in terms of being available to not just pupils, but colleagues, is that ability to try and put people at ease so that they can tell you what it is. Not necessarily that they want to tell you, but they know they need to tell you. They get to the point where they can tell you the essential stuff. Well, my mum had that gift, and so I felt I could tell her anything. The rest of my family, it wasn't quite so easy, to be honest. But they were all very well-meaning. It wasn't that they were overtly against what I was doing. It was that they were concerned. They were concerned for me that that it wasn't just some passing phase. Or, I mean, I think initially when I said I wanted to study music, that was one shock, if you like. And then when it was religious life on top of that, it was like, oh, do you know what you're doing here? I mean, because I was doing well at school, they were all saying, oh, you should go into computing or biochemistry or medicine or, whatever. No, it wasn't for me.
and also, one of the things you mentioned before, and especially stuff that I read about you beforehand, you used the word monk. Obviously, downside and Caldy being a big part of your vocation story. Just briefly for us, just tell us what's the difference between a brother and a monk, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, well, in a monastic community, in a monastery, the members of that community are known as monks. All of them begin by being brothers. Some will be asked to go on for ordination to be able to serve their own community as priests. But the fundamental term that is used to describe them is brother. And very often, I think probably more so nowadays in monasteries, even those that are ordained as fathers, they will still call each other brother. And so a brother is basically a member of a religious community who has taken vows. In most cases, they will be the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. In the case of the brothers in our order, we're what would be regarded as an apostolic community. So rather than being an enclosed contemplative community that withdraws to a certain degree at least from the outside world, our mission is to be sent into the world. I mean, I sometimes kind of jokingly really describe us as urban monks, because there is a lot of overlap. I mean, as I say, the religious vows, we do have a lot in common with monastic brothers, as it were. So you can be a brother without being a monk, or be a brother and be a monk. We're brothers without being monks, without being in a monastery. We would call our own house a community, a religious community, rather than the title monastery.
And so it's coming across really clear that you've got a great passion for music. But you've told me as well that you're quite a big sports fan. Now, one of the stories you touched on was that in your novitiate days you were actually told to bring a bike with you. So obviously cycling's now become a big passion for you. But why was the cycling such an important part to your novitiate life?
It's I guess a quirk of the type of community that I've joined, with it being a community that is focused on working with young people. And I already mentioned about this element of extracurricular activities. Part of our training involved during the novitiate involved us going camping for weekends, learning sport that we didn't already have skills for, so that we could be involved in coaching teams in schools as brothers, in taking outward bound trips, etc. And it wasn't until I became a brother myself post-novitiate that I realized that in those extracurricular activities, you've got a different type of relationship with the young people. a less formalized one, a more relaxed one, perhaps. And again, it maybe creates an environment where the type of conversations that I was referring to earlier that would be typical of someone in the role of chaplain, that those conversations can take place. You know, it might be on a camping with 30 youngsters, with you and a load of other staff, that around a campfire, someone comes up to you and says, "Look, can I have a chat?" So that was very much part of our novitiate training, was to actually develop the skills. I mean, one of them for the camping was map reading. You know, be able to navigate with a map and compass. So it was quite I guess in many ways, an enlightened novitiate. It wasn't all about studying the Bible, studying our rule of life, studying breviary. It was a really fantastic, very rich year. Cycling was part of that, mainly because the assistant novice master, who was the one who did the sport with us, he was and still is, a very, very keen cyclist. And as you mentioned, we're in the foothills of the Pyrenees, and it's Tour de France territory. So what I didn't say was, during my last year of my degree, so the last year prior to the novitiate, Brother Francis actually drove me for a preliminary visit to the novitiate that Easter. And it was during that visit that the assistant novice master said, "Do you have a racing bike?" And I said, "Yeah, I've always cycled to school. I've always cycled to university." It was something I did as a means of transport. Never did it before. I loved it. I love being outdoors. I love being in the fresh air. And so he said, "Right, okay, bring your bike with you." He didn't tell me why, but he said, "Bring the bike with you when you come next August." So we put it in the car. Within a week, I was riding up Pyrenean mountain climbs 3 miles long. I'll never forget it. It was the first one we did. I mean, my bike wasn't a bike built for this. It was an old school rally tourer. It was an old steel touring bike. It was quite a heavy bike, 5 gears. And so this was a bit of a damn slog going up this mountain pass. But I got to the top, and the view from the top, and just this sense of exhilaration that I'd actually managed to do it without stopping. I hadn't put my foot down. It was, I mean, the refrain from the Teletubbies came back to me. It's like, again, I want to do it again. So we ended up cycling initially once a week on Sundays, but then Brother Henri, the assistant novice master, and myself would go out for an extra ride every Wednesday. The reason why our novice master in particular encouraged our brothers back in England to get me a new bike at the end of the year was that growing up, I'd had a lot of back and knee problems. I could show you now, but it's a bit gruesome. I've got a bone out of place just below my kneecap. When I say bone out of place, it's actually a growth. There's like a big knobbly bit underneath. It's called Osgood. I learned this many years later. It's called Osgood-Schlatter disease, and it's a deformation of the knee joint, which means that all the tendons are kind of going in the wrong direction. So whenever I used to play football, I used to enjoy football. I used to play for the school team, but at the end of every match, my knee would swell up. So I talked to Brother Henri at the novitiate about this, and he said, well, cycling's a low-impact sport. If you do it regularly, you'll build up the muscles around your knees, and it might, help you physically long term. By the end of the year, I was able to go up and down mountains hiking. It was impossible for me to do it at the beginning of the year. And also, I'd injured my back between the shoulder blades and also lower down during my teenage years. Put it down to growing pains, I think. I've got quite big bones, but certainly not enough big muscles to support them, or certainly didn't. And so I would pick up a lot of injuries doing sport. And one of the other sports I did do as a lad, which I really enjoyed, which I was encouraged to carry on with as an adult, was swimming. And so they're the two ones that I've kind of carried on with the most in adult life, because they're great for the joints, they're great for the muscles. So yeah, the novice master at the end of the novitiate, he wrote a report, which I only read for the first time in 2013. So 23 years later. And he'd put one phrase in bold at the end, and it was to Brother Francis back in England, said, "I encourage you to get James a new racing bike. cycling has done him a lot of good physically and psychologically, and we encourage him to carry on with it. And God love Brother Francis. He said to the novice master, he said, well, okay, Brother Henri knows a lot about cycling. Let him choose. If you can buy the bike before the end of the novitiate, we'll pay for it, and he can bring it back with him to Liverpool. So I did. I joined a club when I got back here, Merseyside Wheelers, then joined a subsequent club, Birkenhead North End, that I've been riding with ever since. The former club of Chris Boardman, and Steve Cummings, the people who know their Tour de France cycling, both Tour de France stage winners. But one of the things it's led me to do, cycling has given me better physical health, but also I think better mental health. And so over the years, I've sought to try and do something to give something back to others. So every other year, I've done a long distance sponsored ride. The longest of which was to Santiago de Compostela in 2006, which was just an amazing ride. So that was from Liverpool to Santiago, 16 days. Yeah.
It's incredible how these things do really help us, both like you say, physically, but also mentally as well. Now, you're currently, as we've mentioned before, the assistant provincial for the France England province. Just tell us a bit about what that involves.
Just to kind of explain the structure, the kind of hierarchy, in our province, which is a geographical region, it doesn't have to be one country. It can sometimes be part of a country. In our case, it's France and England. Within that province, we have 21 communities of brothers and a network of 70 plus schools that are part of our trust network. Some of which we own, some of which we don't, but we're asked to oversee in terms of the education that goes on there. We have a provincial who is the head brother for the province. I'm an assistant provincial, and my job is to literally assist the provincial. What the provincial does is twofold. He first and foremost ensures the welfare of his fellow brothers. So he's their servant, basically. So part of the provincial's role is to visit the brothers' communities, to be available for them to talk to him, to offer guidance, to arrange for times of retreat, recollection, etc., ensure their ongoing spiritual formation. That's one side of the responsibility. The other side is to liaise with our educational network, which in the past, when brothers were more numerous, would have been managed totally by the brothers, but nowadays is managed for the larger part by our lay team of trustees. Yeah. But the provincial is their chief executive, if you like. So he oversees the work that they do. So he visits schools as well, and he liaises with the educational team. And so there are two assistant provincials, myself and another brother, and we are delegated responsibilities by the provincial to help him in his work. And currently my delegated responsibilities, as I alluded to earlier, involve young adult ministry. So not just accompanying and mentoring our young adults involved in our youth camps, etc., but also helping to organise trips to World Youth Day, other international or national events that we might get involved in, that I take groups to. The social media side of things is already something that I'm semi-officially mandated for. But now that I'll be moving to France, I'll also be sharing in the responsibilities of going around and visiting communities in particular. So that will be, yeah.
And I suppose the big question really is, are you looking forward to your move to France?
I am. I'm not looking forward to leaving Liverpool, but I am looking forward to going to France, if that doesn't sound paradoxical. I'm very fortunate, as I've said, to have done 5 years study in France. And since then, I've been encouraged both by our French brothers and by the brothers in England to keep up with my French. So in other words, to go to France, summer holidays, to take part in annual retreats in France. And then about 10 years ago, I was elected onto our provincial council, which is a larger group of about a dozen brothers who assist the provincial team, the provincial and institute assistants. So I was already going to France once every couple of months for those meetings. I've got a lot of friends among our brothers in France, and a lot of brothers to whom I owe a great debt of gratitude, who've helped me over the years and encouraged me. One of whom is the assistant novice master. And the community I'll be going to this coming summer is 15 miles away from where he lives.
Right.
And through him, I got to know the brothers in his region, which is Finistère, which is the far west of Brittany, and it's the most Celtic part of Brittany. And there's a brother in the house where I'm going to who's 85, and he was an assistant superior general in Rome when I joined the order, and he was the one who encouraged me to do my novitiate in France and then to do my 4 years of study in Paris. And is a great Anglophile, passionate fan of Cardinal Newman. So we've always exchanged books, and he loves classical music and whatever over the years. We've exchanged a lot over the years. And when I was asked, well, what community do you want to go to in France? That community stood out for me because there's brothers there. Me going there is a way of me saying thank you to them for everything they've done for me. So there's a kind of a meaning in that for me. And I was actually there last week. I was there I was in France for 3 weeks. I've just come back from that community in Finistère. I've just an initial house move, an initial car full of boxes of books and stuff. And when I left, they said, "Oh, we can't wait to have you back in the summer." So that was nice. But I will miss Liverpool. Liverpool has become my home. It's a fantastic city. I love the people here. Got a lot of really good friends, both through sport, through music, through the parish. Thankfully, I will be able to come back to England and visit from time to time. I've already discussed with the provincial certain responsibilities or roles that I currently have in England in terms of vocation ministry. I'm kind of one of the contact people for religious brothers that the national office use to get involved in various initiatives, a bit like what you're doing with me here, if you like. So hopefully I'll be able to carry that on even from France, whether it be remotely or physical visits.
Yeah.
So I won't be abandoning England totally, because again, this word passion. One of the things I've always been passionate about is not just sharing the story about my own religious order, but about the vocation to brotherhood in general. Because as a lot of people say to me in other religious orders or even priests, they say brotherhood is kind of like the forgotten vocation.
Yeah.
Because very often in vocation resources, you'll have, which is understandable, you'll have priesthood, possibly monastic life, and then you'll have female religious life. And there might not be any vocation of non-ordained male religious life. And so I've always tried to, with a few other brothers from other orders, tried to be a bit of a spokesperson for that vocation and try and be present on the internet, whether it be through blogging or through Facebook or whatever, and just let people know, yep, we're still here, we're still fighting, we're still at it. Realistically speaking, it may not be the case that we'll get an influx of dozens of vocations into this country for our order. But we have got someone in discernment at the moment who's actually working abroad currently. He's been in lockdown in Italy. He's a former pupil of ours in Liverpool.
Right.
Quite literally, God knows where he's going to end up. I say that deliberately, kind of tongue in cheek. But with the conversations we've had with him, his thoughts at the moment are that he wants to be, or is considering becoming, a Manesian missionary. So he's thinking about the possibility of joining our order, but working overseas.
Right.
So, if people were to, by the way, I wasn't planning to say this, but I'll say it now anyway. If anyone did say to me, well, look, we'd be interested in becoming a Delaminate brother, I would say to them, well, we're an international congregation. We're in 26 countries. The odds are a person would have to do at least part of their training abroad anyway. Would you be willing to buy into that? You might end up spending some time in England helping us to reopen a community in England. You might spend all of your life abroad. Who knows that as a congregation? As long as, you know, that person was convinced that God was calling them to us. That would be the bottom line. So in other words, we wouldn't close our doors. And it's sad because some congregations have. I find that very sad that they've closed their doors to people, and they're international congregations. So they could you know, foster a vocation that might take someone overseas. It wouldn't necessarily be for their home country, at least not initially.
And I think what I'm hearing there as well is there's still hope for vocation as well. And so, just at the end, as we come to the end of the Clergy Cafe, what I'm going to ask you to do is if you could give your message to young people of our diocese and of the country, whoever's watching really. And that might be a message of vocation, maybe a message of brotherhood. But what would your message, Brother Jim, be to the young people of our diocese and of the country?
I suppose I could sum it up in 3 points. The first would be every single person has a calling from God. Now, that might be a calling to married life, to celibate single life, to some form of vowed commitment within the church. But it's a phrase that I would use in teaching quite a lot, that my life as a brother has given me so much happiness and fulfillment. I couldn't imagine another way of life doing the same for me. And I think everyone has a calling from God to that life which will give them the most happiness and fulfillment. And my prayer to everyone listening, to everyone watching, would be that you find what that way of life is, whether it be through married life, whether it be through single life, whether it be through a combination of perhaps married life and work in the church in some way, or a full-time commitment within the church or within a religious order, priesthood. That would be the first thing. Connected with that, I would say, again, I'd come back to this idea of passion. I think I was helped immensely in my own vocation journey by listening to the passion I had within me for music. One thing I didn't mention was that it was actually an uncle of mine in Ireland who, on a trip over there, pointed me towards religious life as opposed to priesthood, because he suggested to me, having thought at that stage that I'd have to choose between the two, that I might be able to find a way of combining vocation and music through religious life. That was what sent me down that path. And I would say to young people, follow your passion. If your passion is something that gives you life and can give life to others, God will speak to you through that passion, as he did to me through that song that I was listening to when I was in lower sixth. And finally, I would say make space for God. I mentioned that I got a lot of benefit from just those little break times and lunch times going into the chapel in school. I very often wouldn't actually vocalize any prayers or even say the rosary. Sometimes I did, but a lot of times I would just sit there and be quiet. And I could gradually feel during those times, it was as if the mist within me just started to clear. The more and more I did that, the more and more I gave time to being consciously in God's presence. So yeah, we've all got a calling. Find what your passion is, be passionate about it, share that passion with others, and make space for God.
Brother Jim, thank you for sharing that with us. So at the end, we're just going to very quickly run through our religious life top trumps. I hope you've got your numbers there. It's incredible how competitive some religious are these days. You're up against the Sisters of Nazareth. So let's see how you do. Okay. What date was your order founded?
1819.
Ooh, so the Sisters of Nazareth were 1851, so you pipped them to that one. Second one, numbers in your congregation.
Currently 744.
Ooh, Sisters of Nazareth was 345. Well done. A number of houses. Now, I'm afraid this one you might not do very well on. Number of houses in the UK. One. Yeah, we're going to have to go current now, yeah. So one at the moment. Number of countries where the congregation is present.
26.
Wow. Sisters of Nazareth was 9. So again, well done on that one. Now, I'm not sure about this one because I didn't do my research on this question. Number of saints in your order.
0.
Ooh.
We've got our founder whose cause for beatification actually began many, many years ago.
Right.
There are 2 possible miracles that are being discussed in Rome at present. We're hoping that we might get a decision on that in the next couple of years.
That's quite exciting.
Yeah.
So the sisters were the same. None. Now this is a movable one, so you can choose where you go on the scale. The habit, 1 being no habit and 10 being full habit. Where would you place yourself on the habit scale?
It would, if I was thinking about the congregation as a whole, it varies from one country to another. I'd say myself, I'd probably put myself at 3.
Right.
Oh, no, I'll be more than that. I'll say 5. When we're in school, we wear clerical collar and black suits. So that's our kind of school uniform, and for going to mass, if you like. Generally, I mean, something that we've been developing in recent years is an identity through this logo and through clothing like that. So I would always wear my crucifix. Go on, I'll give us a 5. I'll be generous.
It's amazing how some religious just start to slide on that one as well. So now, 24 hours is banned in this last question. Number of hours in prayer per day, and we've sort of said formal prayer.
Yeah, sure. I was going to try the 24 hours, but I knew I'd not going to.
It's gone.
Yeah. Well, 1 hour, 20 minutes in the morning, which is a combination of mass. We go to mass in the parish, half an hour meditation, 20 minutes divine office. Then in the evening, a combination of divine office and personal examine for half an hour. So in terms of formal prayer, 1 hour, 50 minutes. But we're encouraged individually to have our own times of personal prayer, whether it be rosary, Divine Mercy prayer. With me, a lot of it is through music, through listening to and praying through worship songs. I'd say probably on average 2 hours 10, 2 hours 10, 2 hours 15.
Well, I think what's really interesting for the apostolic orders that's almost the norm, really. It's run about 2 to 3 hours. Now, Brother Jim, I'm just going to have to say a massive thank you for joining us tonight. I suspect we could fill another 3 or 4 clergy cafes just talking to you. I think people at home don't really realise how many questions we've missed tonight. But Brother Jim, if I can ask you just not to go anywhere just yet, we'll bring you back in at the end once we have prayed. But for now, thank you very much for joining us, and we will speak to you at the end.
Thanks very much for the invitation. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks.
So that was Brother Jim sharing some of his story, and I'm just going to very quickly bring in Father Chris back into the Clergy Cafe. Father Chris, I could easily fill at least another 3 episodes with Brother Jim. So I'm just going to simply hand over to you and ask you to lead us in prayer tonight.
Thanks, Sandy. As we begin our time of prayer together this evening, let's make the sign of the cross. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. As we listen to an extract from the Gospel from St. Mark, remember that whenever the Gospel is proclaimed, it's Jesus himself speaking to us. Jesus and his disciples left for the villages around Caesarea Philippi. And on the way, he put this question to his disciples: "Who do people say I am?" And they told him, "John the Baptist," they said, "others Elijah, others again one of the prophets. But you," he asked, "who do you say I am?" Peter spoke up and said to him, "You are the Christ." And he gave them strict orders not to tell anyone about him. In that gospel extract we just listened to, Jesus asks his disciples, his friends, who they think he is. He gets various answers until Peter hits the nail on the head and gets the answer right. You are the Christ. It's worth, I think, asking ourselves the same question. Who is Jesus for you? Is he judge and jury waiting to catch you out? Is he at a distance, uninterested in your life? Or is he your companion and guide, the beginning and end of who you are, your closest friend, always at your side, the reason you get out of bed in the morning, the source of your strength? Is he your everything? Jesus wants that close and intimate relationship with you. That is his desire for you. So as we say the Lord's Prayer together this evening, let's ask God for that grace to see Jesus for who he wants to be in your life. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Let us pray. Pour out on us, O Lord, we pray, a spirit of truth, understanding and peace, that we may know with all our heart what is pleasing to you. Through Christ our Lord. Amen. The Lord be with you. And may Almighty God bless you, the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Go in peace, glorifying the Lord by your life. Thanks be to God.
And so that brings us yet again to the end of another incredible story of the Clergy Cafe. It's really been great to have Brother Jim and Father Chris with us. I'm just going to bring both back in now. Brother Jim, I said it before, but a massive thank you for sharing some of your wisdom with us tonight, some of your experience in your life. It's an incredible, and I think you touched on it briefly before as well, that vocation to the brotherhood is an important one as well. It's one that is often just sort of slid off to the side, but thank you for your vocation, and thank you for saying yes to that vocation, but also to saying yes to the Clergy Cafe, because I know you've had your arm slightly twisted into doing this one. So thank you for that. But also from us at the Diocese of Shrewsbury, good luck when you move to France.
Thank you very much.
And if you're interested when you move back and you fancy doing another Clergy Cafe, I've got at least another page of questions to ask. So thank you very much for that. And Father Chris, as always, thank you very much for being with us as a constant in the Clergy Cafe. So, gents, once again, thank you very much for joining us, and we shall call it a day there. As always, don't forget to follow us on social media. It's below, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. And also, I slightly showed it earlier, but don't forget that we are on YouTube and you are watching us on YouTube, so don't forget to click that bell. There's a few interesting bits and pieces coming up in the next few weeks, and we are hoping to continue the religious life specials in the Clergy Cafe. We've discovered that they've become really popular, so if you're watching this and you want us to try and see if we can get a few different orders in that you might be interested in, please do let us know. Drop us a message, drop us a note below the video. We're going to try and reach out to some different orders, a bit like we reached out to Brother Jim tonight. So, once again, thank you very much for joining us. It's great to have you with us. Thank you for watching, and we shall see you the same time next week for another Religious Life special.